Before we dive into tonight's terrifying journey through the darkest corners of the internet, I need you to do something for me. Hit that subscribe button right now, because what you're about to hear, these stories don't stay online for long. These are the posts that vanish, the accounts that disappear, the people who stop responding. And if you want to be part of uncovering what happened to them, you need to subscribe. Hit that like button too. Trust me, you'll understand why by the end of this video. What I'm about to share with you isn't just another collection of creepy stories. These are real posts from real people who came to Reddit desperately seeking help. They shared their darkest moments, their most terrifying experiences, their cries for assistance. And then, without explanation, without warning, they disappeared. The posts were deleted. The accounts went dark, and we were left with nothing but questions. Questions that haunt me to this day. Questions that will haunt you too. Tonight, we're going down a rabbit hole that most people don't even know exists. A digital graveyard of deleted posts and abandoned accounts. Stories that someone, somewhere, didn't want us to know. And I have to warn you right now, some of what you're about to hear is genuinely disturbing. This isn't fiction. These were real people living through real nightmares. So if you're easily unsettled, maybe this isn't the video for you. But if you're still here, if you're ready to dive deep into the unknown with me, then let's begin. Our first story starts innocently enough. A person we'll call James posted on Reddit about something strange happening in his apartment. Objects kept disappearing. At first, it seemed like normal forgetfulness. You know how it is. You put your keys somewhere and can't remember where. You misplace your phone. It happens to everyone, but this was different. This was systematic, deliberate, and it was about to get so much worse. James explained that random items would vanish from his apartment, only to reappear days later in the strangest place. Behind a cupboard in his bedroom, wedged into spaces so tight that he couldn't even reach them without dismantling furniture. His anti-mosquito device disappeared first. He searched everywhere, tore his apartment apart looking for it, eventually gave up and bought a new one. And the very next day, there it was, stuck behind the cupboard. Impossible to reach. Impossible to have gotten there by accident. Then his neck pillow vanished, the one he used every time he traveled. Again, days of searching. Nothing. And then suddenly, there it was, in that same impossible space behind the cupboard, still wedged in there so tightly that he couldn't even retrieve it. He could see it. He could touch it with his fingertips, but he couldn't pull it out. It was like someone was playing a game with him. A twisted, psychological game. And James was starting to break. This continued for 2 weeks. 2 weeks of items disappearing and reappearing in places they couldn't possibly be. 2 weeks of James questioning his own sanity. Was he sleepwalking? Did he have some kind of dissociative disorder? Was he losing his mind? But then, as suddenly as it started, it stopped. 4 days went by with nothing. No disappearances, no strange occurrences, just silence. And somehow, that silence was even more terrifying than what came before. James made a decision. He installed a camera. Well, not really a professional camera. He used an app called Alfred on an old iPhone, basically turned his spare phone into a security camera. He set it up in his living room and bedroom, hoping to catch whatever was happening while he slept. And what he captured that night would change everything. What he captured would make him wish he'd never looked. That night, James was woken up by a sound, a loud thud, like something heavy had fallen to the floor. His heart racing, he got out of bed and searched the entire apartment. Nothing was out of place. Nothing had fallen. Everything was exactly where it should be. He convinced himself it was nothing. Maybe something outside. Maybe the people in the apartment above him. He went back to bed, but he couldn't shake the feeling that something was very, very wrong. The next morning, James checked the camera app, and his blood ran cold. The app had recorded 3 motion-activated events during the night. 3 times something had moved in his living room. 3 times the camera had captured movement. With trembling hands, he opened the images, and what he saw was impossible to explain. In the darkness of his living room, with only the low-light camera able to capture the scene, there was something, or someone. Now, here's where it gets interesting. And by interesting, I mean absolutely terrifying. If you're enjoying this story so far, if your heart is racing even a little bit, do me a favor and hit that like button, because this is just the beginning. We have hours of content ahead, stories that will make this one seem tame by comparison. So subscribe if you haven't already, smash that like button, and let's continue. James posted the images to Reddit, desperately asking for help. He couldn't make out exactly what the camera had captured. The image was dark, grainy, but there was definitely something there. Something that shouldn't have been there. The comment section exploded. People analyzing every pixel, pointing out shapes in the darkness. Some said they could see a figure. Others said it was just shadows playing tricks. But everyone agreed on one thing. James needed to call the police immediately. He needed to get out of that apartment, because if something or someone had been in his living room while he slept, he was in danger, serious danger. But here's the thing. Here's what makes this story one of the unexplainable posts that vanished overnight. James never updated. The post stayed up for about 18 hours. People were commenting, offering advice, sharing their own similar experiences. And then, without any warning, the post was deleted. The account disappeared. James was gone. And we never found out what happened. Did he discover who was moving his objects? Was there actually someone in his apartment that night? Did something happen to him? We'll never know. And that's what makes this so haunting. The not knowing. The questions that will never be answered. Think about that for a moment. Really think about it. Someone was desperate enough to post on Reddit asking for help. They captured something on camera that scared them. And then they vanished from the internet entirely. Either they deleted everything themselves, which raises the question of why, or someone else made them disappear. And I don't know which option is more terrifying. Let's move on to our next story. But before we do, I want you to leave a comment right now. Tell me what you think happened to James. Do you think he's okay? Do you think there was really someone in his apartment? Or do you think there's a more sinister explanation? Comment below. And make sure you're subscribed, because we're just getting started. Our second story is about a woman we'll call Sarah. And Sarah's story is about something that every person fears deep down. That the person you love, the person you trust more than anyone in the world, might be hiding something from you. Something dark. Something unforgivable. Sarah had been with her boyfriend, let's call him Michael, for 5 years. 5 years of what she thought was a perfect relationship. They rarely argued. When they did, they resolved things rationally. Like adults, they were planning to move in together. Everything seemed perfect until Sarah discovered the room. Michael owned a house, a big Victorian house with 5 bedrooms and 3 bathrooms. He'd bought it a decade ago when the real estate market in their city had crashed. Bought it cheap in a bad neighborhood and fixed it up himself. Over the years, the neighborhood improved. The house was now worth a fortune, and Sarah was excited to move in. She'd been spending more time there, getting familiar with the space, making plans for how they'd arrange their furniture. Which room would be her office? Which room would be his? It was supposed to be a happy time. But then she noticed something strange. One of the bedrooms upstairs had a padlock on it. Not just a regular door lock that you could open with a key. A heavy-duty padlock. The kind you'd use on a storage unit or a garage. The kind that said, "Whatever is in here, I really don't want anyone to see it." At first, Sarah didn't think much of it. Michael had lived alone for 10 years in this big house. Maybe he just didn't use that room. Maybe it was full of junk or old furniture. But the more she thought about it, the more it bothered her. Why a padlock? Why not just a regular lock? What could possibly be in there that required that level of security? She asked Michael about it casually one evening. Just mentioned that she'd noticed the locked room, and his response was strange. He just shrugged, said he didn't really go in there or use it. That was it. No explanation, no details, just a dismissive shrug like it was no big deal. Sarah pressed a little harder, asked what was in the room, and Michael's answer was even more bizarre. He said, "Stuff. Just stuff." Like that was supposed to be a satisfactory answer. Like that was supposed to make her stop asking questions. Sarah suggested they open it up. She was going to need a home office when she moved in. Why not use that room? It seemed perfect. A whole empty room just sitting there unused. But Michael shut that down immediately. Said no, not that room. Any other room in the house was fine, but not that one. And Sarah's alarm bells started ringing, because that's not normal. That's not how people behave when they have nothing to hide. When you're in a relationship, when you're planning to move in together, you don't have locked rooms with secrets. You just don't. Now, I want to pause here for a second. Take a breath. Because what comes next in this story is heavy, really heavy, and I want to make sure you're still with me. If you're finding this compelling, if you want to know what was in that room, hit that subscribe button. Because the answer is not what you'd expect. It's not what anyone expected. And it's going to stay with you long after this video ends. Sarah couldn't let it go. The locked room consumed her thoughts. She wasn't trying to invade Michael's privacy. She wasn't being controlling or suspicious for no reason. She just couldn't understand why, after 5 years together, after planning to move in together, there would be a room in their shared home that was completely off limits. It didn't make sense, and the more Michael refused to talk about it, the more concerned she became. Was it guns? Was it something related to his work? Michael was in law enforcement. Maybe it was evidence or weapons or something classified. That would make sense, right? That would be a reasonable explanation. But then why not just say that? Why be so secretive about it? Why not just tell her, "Hey, it's work-related, I can't discuss it"? That would have been understandable. But instead, Michael acted like the room didn't exist. Like it was no big deal. and that made Sarah more uncomfortable than any explanation possibly could have. Because when someone refuses to explain something simple, it usually means the truth is complicated. And complicated truths are rarely good truths. Sarah told Michael she couldn't move in until she knew what was in the room. This wasn't an ultimatum. This wasn't her being difficult. This was her establishing a basic boundary. She needed to know what was behind that locked door before she committed to living in that house, before she made this place her home. It was reasonable. Any reasonable person would understand that. But Michael's reaction was not what she expected. He didn't get angry. He didn't get defensive. He broke down completely. Michael started crying. Not just regular tears. These were deep, body-shaking sobs. The kind of crying that comes from a place of profound trauma. Sarah had never seen him like this. In 5 years, she'd never seen him shed a tear. He wasn't the type to cry, but now he was sobbing so hard he couldn't breathe, couldn't form words. Just this raw, anguished crying that went on for 15 minutes. And Sarah knew, in that moment, that whatever was behind that door, it wasn't guns. It wasn't work stuff. It was something much, much worse. When Michael finally calmed down enough to speak, the truth came out. And it was heartbreaking. There was nothing in the room. The room was completely empty. But the room itself was the problem. You see, Michael had bought that house when he was just 19 years old. A kid, really. He got a great deal on it, used all his savings for the down payment, and moved in planning to fix it up himself. He'd been living there for only 3 weeks. 3 weeks. He was alone in this big house in a bad neighborhood, and one night, someone broke in. Someone came into his home while he was there, and in that room, the room that was now padlocked shut, Michael was violently assaulted. Let me be clear about something. I'm not going to give you the graphic details. Michael didn't share them publicly, and I'm not going to speculate. But what happened to him in that room was traumatic enough that even a decade later, he couldn't bring himself to open that door. Couldn't bring himself to go inside. Couldn't bring himself to even talk about it. He'd locked it up and tried to pretend it didn't exist. Tried to pretend that night never happened. And that trauma, that deeply buried trauma, was why he became a police officer, because he wanted to help other people, wanted to prevent what happened to him from happening to someone else. Sarah never asked to see inside the room after that. She didn't need to. She understood. And I'm telling you this story not because it has some shocking twist or some scary revelation. I'm telling you this story because it's real. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't a ghost or a monster. Sometimes the scariest thing is what humans do to each other. The trauma we carry. The secrets we keep because the truth is too painful to speak out loud. And this post, this cry for help from Sarah, was deleted within days. Both Sarah and Michael disappeared from Reddit entirely. And I genuinely hope, that they found peace, that they worked through this together, that they're okay. But we'll never know. And that's the pattern with these unexplainable posts. They appear. They share something deeply personal and deeply disturbing. And then they vanish, like they were never there at all. Now, before we continue, I need you to do something for me. I need you to hit that like button if you're still watching. I need you to subscribe if you haven't already. Because we're about to get into some stories that are even darker, even more disturbing, And I need to know you're ready for that. So subscribe, hit like, leave a comment telling me you're still here, and let's keep going. Our next story is about technology, about how the devices we trust, the devices we bring into our homes to make our lives easier, can be turned against us. This is the story of a woman we'll call Lisa. And Lisa's nightmare started with a voice coming from her smart speaker, a voice that shouldn't have been there. Lisa lived alone. She had a pretty standard setup: Amazon Echo in the living room, a Fire Stick for her TV, Ring camera at the front door, all the modern conveniences that millions of people have in their homes. She felt safe, secure. Her apartment was her sanctuary, until the night she heard a man's voice coming from her Echo speaker. A voice she didn't recognize. A voice that said her name, said it clearly, said it in a way that made her blood run cold. Because this wasn't a malfunction. This wasn't Alexa misunderstanding a command. This was a person, a real person, speaking to her through her smart speaker. Lisa panicked. She unplugged the Echo immediately, checked all her doors and windows. Everything was locked. Nobody could have gotten into her apartment. But that voice had been so clear, so real. It had known her name. She tried to rationalize it. Maybe it was a glitch. Maybe somehow someone else's device had connected to hers. Maybe it was a radio frequency interference. There had to be a logical explanation. There had to be. Because the alternative, the idea that someone had deliberately hacked into her smart speaker to talk to her, was too terrifying to consider. But Lisa couldn't shake the feeling. She checked her Amazon account, looked at the connected devices, and that's when she saw it. 2 Fire Sticks. She only owned 1 Fire Stick, but her account showed 2 devices, both showing as online, both connected to her account, and she had no idea where the second one was. Had someone plugged a Fire Stick into her TV without her knowing? Had they been in her apartment? Or was this Fire Stick somewhere else entirely, in someone else's home, but connected to her account? Either way, someone had access to her devices. Someone could see what she was watching, could hear what she was saying, could speak to her through her speakers whenever they wanted. Lisa contacted Amazon immediately, explained the situation. They escalated it to their investigations department, told her someone would call her back within 48 hours. But Lisa couldn't wait that long. She needed answers now. She needed to know who was doing this and why. So she did what many people do when they don't know where else to turn. She posted on Reddit, explained what was happening, asked if anyone knew how this could be possible, how someone could hack into her Amazon account and add devices without her knowledge. The responses came quickly. People shared similar stories, explained how these devices could be exploited, how someone with enough technical knowledge could gain access to smart home devices and use them for surveillance, or harassment, or worse. Some commenters suggested she change all her passwords. Some suggested she contact the police. Some suggested she was dealing with a stalker. And that last suggestion hit Lisa like a punch to the gut, because it made horrible, terrible sense. You see, Lisa had a history. Years ago, she'd been in an abusive relationship. She'd been assaulted. And after she finally escaped, after she finally got away from her abuser, he'd continued to contact her. He'd message her on social media from new accounts every time she blocked him. He'd somehow regained access to her Facebook even after she changed her password. He was technologically savvy, always had been interested in computers and hacking, and Lisa realized, with growing horror, that this might be him, that he might have escalated from social media harassment to actually infiltrating her home through her smart devices. She'd reported him to the police months ago. They'd told her there was nothing they could do unless he made direct threats. She didn't have a restraining order because he'd never been prosecuted for what he'd done to her. The system had failed her, and now he was in her home, digitally speaking, watching her, listening to her, talking to her. And there was nothing she could do about it. She couldn't prove it was him. She couldn't prove any of it. Lisa updated her Reddit post several times, each update more desperate than the last. She discovered through her Alexa app that there were devices connected to her account that she'd never set up. An Echo Dot that she'd bought for her mother, but that had never been taken out of the box. It was showing as offline, which made sense, but why was it on her account at all? And those 2 Fire Sticks, one was hers, the other was a complete mystery. She couldn't get any information from Amazon. They were investigating, they said. They'd get back to her, they said. But in the meantime, Lisa was living in fear. And then, just like the others, Lisa's posts disappeared. The account was deleted. We never found out what Amazon's investigation revealed. We never found out if it was her ex-boyfriend. We never found out if Lisa was okay. She just vanished. And I think about her sometimes. I think about whether she's safe, whether she ever got answers, whether the person harassing her was ever caught. But I'll never know. None of us will ever know. Because Lisa became another unexplainable disappearance, another person who came to the internet for help and then vanished without a trace. Now listen, I know this is heavy. I know these stories are disturbing, but this is reality. This is the world we live in, where our smart devices can be turned against us, where abusers can use technology to continue their abuse even after we've escaped them, and where the systems that are supposed to protect us often fail. If you're still watching, if you're still here with me, hit that subscribe button, because awareness is the first step. Understanding what's possible, understanding the dangers, that's how we protect ourselves and the people we love. Let me move on to another story, but I want to warn you, this next one is particularly disturbing. It involves obsession. It involves violation of privacy on a level that's hard to comprehend. This is the story of a young man, we'll call him David, who discovered something about his girlfriend that changed everything. David was 21. His girlfriend, let's call her Emma, was 24. They'd been dating for just 5 weeks. Everything was new and exciting. That honeymoon phase where you can't get enough of each other, where everything feels perfect. David stayed over at Emma's apartment one night. She lived about 15 minutes from his college campus. They had a great evening, watched movies, ordered food, fell asleep together. Everything normal, everything perfect, until the next morning when Emma's behavior changed. Emma had to leave early for work. She was acting nervous, fidgety, not herself. She kept glancing at her laptop, made sure it was closed, made sure David wasn't near it. At first, David didn't think anything of it. People are allowed to be private about their devices. That's normal. That's healthy. But Emma's behavior was extreme. She was almost panicking every time David got near her laptop. and that struck him as odd. They'd been dating for over a month. She had nothing to worry about. He wasn't the type to snoop through someone's computer. But after Emma left, David's curiosity got the better of him. He tells himself he was just looking for a charger, just needed to borrow her laptop for a minute. But if we're being honest, he was curious. Something about Emma's behavior had set off alarm bells, and he wanted to know why. So he opened her laptop, and what he found was beyond anything he could have imagined. Beyond anything that could be explained by normal relationship behavior. There was a folder on Emma's desktop, just a regular folder with a plain name. Nothing suspicious about it from the outside, but when David opened that folder, his world fell apart. Inside were hundreds of photos, hundreds of candid photographs of him. Photos taken without his knowledge, without his consent. Photos of him sleeping, photos of him eating, photos of him walking down the street, photos of him at the gym, photos of him in his apartment through his window, photos spanning weeks or maybe even months, all taken secretly, all taken by Emma. David's hands were shaking as he scrolled through the folder, photo after photo after photo. Some were clearly taken from Emma's phone when they were together, sneaky shots when he wasn't looking. But others, the ones that made his skin crawl, were taken from a distance, zoomed in, grainy, like she'd been following him, stalking him, documenting his every move, and they'd only been dating for 5 weeks. 5 weeks. How long had she been watching him before they even started dating? How long had this obsession been going on? David did what any rational person would do. He got out of there. He didn't confront Emma, didn't ask her to explain, just grabbed his things and left, went straight home, and then did something that, in hindsight, was probably not the best idea. He posted about it on Reddit, explained what he'd found, asked for advice. Was this normal? Was he overreacting? Should he be scared? And the Reddit community's response was unanimous. This was not normal. This was stalking. This was obsessive behavior. And David needed to end this relationship immediately and possibly get the police involved. But here's where it gets even stranger. Emma started calling him, texting him, showing up at his apartment. At first, she played innocent, asked why he'd left so suddenly, if everything was okay. But David couldn't bring himself to tell her the truth. Couldn't bring himself to say, "I found your folder. I know what you've been doing." He just told her he needed space, that things were moving too fast, generic breakup talk. But Emma didn't accept it. She kept pushing, kept demanding to know what happened, why he'd changed so suddenly, and David remained silent. Reddit users were tracking the situation through David's updates. They were worried. Some told him to block Emma completely. Some told him to file a police report. Some told him to get a restraining order. But David was young, confused. He didn't know what to do. And then, after one final update where David said Emma had shown up at his work, the posts disappeared. The account was deleted, and David was gone. What happened? Did Emma find out about the Reddit posts? Did she do something to David? Did David's family or friends convince him to delete everything and handle it privately? Or did something worse happen? We'll never know. And that's the recurring theme of tonight's stories. These people, these real people, going through real nightmares, they come to the internet for help. They share their stories, and then they disappear. And we're left wondering, always wondering, If you're still here, if you're still watching, leave a comment. Tell me what you think happened to David. Do you think he's okay? Do you think Emma was dangerous? What would you have done in his situation? And make sure you're subscribed, because we're not done yet. We have more stories, more unexplainable disappearances, more questions that will never be answered. Let me tell you about another case. This one involves a family, a young couple with a newborn baby. Let's call them Mark and Jennifer. They just brought their baby home from the hospital. Everything was perfect, exhausting, but perfect. That beautiful chaos of new parenthood, late night feedings, diaper changes, the overwhelming love you feel for this tiny human you created. But that perfect bubble was about to be shattered in the most disturbing way possible. Mark was home alone with the baby one afternoon. Jennifer had gone out to pick up some groceries. Just a quick trip to the store, nothing unusual. Mark was in the living room with the baby when there was a knock at the door. He checked the peephole, saw a woman standing there, middle-aged, professional-looking, carrying a clipboard. She looked official. So Mark, thinking nothing of it, opened the door. And that decision would haunt him. The woman introduced herself as a social worker, said she needed to see the baby, said it was standard procedure for all newborns, just a wellness check to make sure everything was okay. Now, Mark should have questioned this, should have asked for identification, should have called Jennifer or the hospital to verify. But he was a new dad, sleep-deprived, overwhelmed, and this woman seemed legitimate. She knew they had a baby. She knew the baby was a newborn. She had a clipboard with official-looking forms, so he let her in. The woman asked to see the baby, asked to check the baby's vitals, asked if she could take the baby to another room for the examination. And that's when Mark's parental instincts kicked in. Something felt wrong. This woman wanted to take his baby, alone, to another room, away from him. And every fiber of his being screamed no. He told the woman he preferred to stay with the baby during the examination, that he'd be more comfortable if she did the check right there in the living room where he could see. And the woman's entire demeanor changed. She became agitated, insisted she needed privacy, needed to take the baby away from Mark, needed to conduct the examination alone. And Mark, now fully alert, now fully aware that something was very wrong, refused, told her no, told her to leave. But the woman didn't leave. She became aggressive, started demanding to see the baby, started reaching for the baby, and Mark had to physically block her, had to put himself between this stranger and his child. And in that moment, Mark knew with absolute certainty that this woman was not a social worker, that whatever she wanted with his baby, it wasn't for a wellness check. Mark told her to leave again, this time more forcefully, threatened to call the police if she didn't. And finally, the woman left. But not before giving Mark a look that chilled him to his core. A look of pure anger, pure hatred, like he'd ruined her plans, like he'd taken something from her that she believed was rightfully hers. Mark immediately called Jennifer, called the hospital, called the police. And that's when he learned the truth. There was no scheduled home visit. No social worker had been sent to their house. This woman, whoever she was, had targeted them, had somehow known they'd just brought a baby home, had shown up at their door with the specific intention of taking that baby away. The police took a report, told Mark and Jennifer to be vigilant, to not open the door for anyone, to verify any official visits beforehand. But they couldn't do much else. The woman hadn't actually committed a crime, they said. She'd left when asked. There was no evidence she'd intended to harm the baby. Mark posted about this experience on Reddit, warned other new parents to be careful, to always verify who's at your door, to trust your instincts even when someone seems official. The post gained traction. Other parents shared similar stories of people posing as social workers or health department officials trying to gain access to newborns. It was a pattern, a terrifying pattern. But Mark's story didn't end there. A few days later, there was another knock at the door. Same woman, same clipboard. But this time, Mark didn't even open the door. He called the police immediately, watched through the peephole as the woman stood there, knocking, waiting. By the time the police arrived, she was gone, vanished, and they were never able to find her, never able to identify her. She'd targeted this family twice, had been bold enough to come back even after Mark had rejected her the first time, and then she'd disappeared. Mark updated his Reddit post, explained what had happened, and the comment section exploded with theories. Was this woman part of a child trafficking ring? Was she working with a black market adoption agency? Was she mentally ill and fixated on babies? Or was there an even more sinister explanation? But we never got answers, because a week after that final update, Mark's account was deleted. All the posts were gone. Mark and Jennifer disappeared from Reddit completely, and we were left wondering if that woman ever came back, if the family was safe, if they had to move, change their names, live in constant fear, or if maybe, hopefully, the police eventually caught her and put an end to the nightmare. These stories, all of these stories, they share common threads. Real people in real danger, coming to the internet as a last resort, sharing their experiences hoping someone could help, and then vanishing without explanation, without closure, leaving those of us who read their words to wonder what happened, to lose sleep over questions we'll never have answered. Now, before we move to our final stories of the night, I need you to do something. I need you to hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. I need you to like this video, and I need you to comment below. Tell me which story affected you the most. Tell me if you've had similar experiences. Tell me what you think happened to these people. Because that engagement, those comments, that's how we build a community. That's how we support each other. That's how we make sure that when someone comes to the internet for help, they find it. So subscribe, like, comment, and let's finish this journey together. Our final story tonight is perhaps the most mysterious of all. It involves something that millions of people experience, but few talk about openly: sleep paralysis. Or at least, that's what it started as. This is the story of a woman we'll call Rachel. And Rachel's experience began like many others do. She woke up in the middle of the night, unable to move, completely paralyzed, could only move her eyes, could see her bedroom around her, could see the shadows, could see the darkness, and she could see something else, a figure standing in the corner of her room. Now, sleep paralysis is well documented. We understand the science behind it. Your brain wakes up before your body does. You're caught between sleeping and waking. And often, people hallucinate during these episodes. See shadow figures. Feel a presence in the room. It's terrifying when it happens, but it's not supernatural. It's just your brain playing tricks on you. That's what Rachel told herself that first night. She had sleep paralysis. She hallucinated a figure in her room. It wasn't real. It was just her brain misfiring. Nothing to worry about. She went back to sleep, and in the morning, everything was fine. But it happened again. The next night, and the night after that. Every single night, Rachel would wake up paralyzed, and every single night, that figure would be standing in the corner of her room. Same spot, same position, never moving, just standing there, watching her. And Rachel started to notice details that shouldn't be possible in a hallucination. The figure was tall, wearing dark clothes, had a specific posture, with its head tilted at an unnatural angle. And most disturbing of all, Rachel started to recognize it, started to feel like this wasn't a random hallucination. This was something specific, someone specific. Rachel did what any rational person would do. She researched sleep paralysis, read medical journals, watched videos of other people describing their experiences, and she found comfort in the explanations, found comfort in knowing this was a known phenomenon, that thousands of people experienced this every night, that it wasn't dangerous, it wasn't real, it was just her brain. But then things started happening during the day, things that couldn't be explained by sleep paralysis. Items in Rachel's apartment started moving. She'd put something down, turn around, and it would be somewhere else. She'd lock her door before bed, and in the morning, it would be unlocked. She'd close her windows, and they'd be open. At first, she thought she was losing her mind, thought maybe the sleep paralysis was affecting her memory, making her confused, making her forget things. But Rachel was meticulous. She started documenting everything, taking photos of where she placed items, taking videos of herself locking doors and closing windows. And when those items moved, when those doors unlocked, when those windows opened, Rachel knew something was very, very wrong. She set up cameras, just like James did in our first story. Cheap security cameras from Amazon. Nothing fancy, just enough to catch movement in her apartment while she was asleep. And what those cameras captured was beyond anything Rachel could have imagined. There was someone in her apartment, a real person, not a hallucination, not a dream. A real human being entering her apartment every single night while she slept. And that figure she'd been seeing during sleep paralysis, that was this person, standing in the corner of her room, watching her every single night. Rachel's camera footage was grainy, dark, but you could clearly see a person moving through her apartment, see them standing in her bedroom doorway, see them approaching her bed, and in some footage, you could see them lean down, close to Rachel's face, like they were whispering to her while she slept. Rachel was being stalked in the most intimate, violating way possible. This person had been entering her home, watching her sleep, moving her belongings, all while she was unconscious. The sleep paralysis wasn't random. It was her subconscious trying to protect her, trying to wake her up, trying to alert her to the danger in her room. Rachel immediately went to the police, showed them the footage, filed a report. And that's when she learned something that made the situation even more horrifying. The locks on her apartment doors and windows showed no signs of forced entry. Whoever was getting in had a key, or knew how to pick locks without leaving evidence. The police increased patrols in her neighborhood, told her to change her locks, told her to stay with family or friends until they figured out who was doing this. Rachel took their advice, moved out that same day, stayed with her sister, and waited for the police to catch whoever had been terrorizing her. She posted about her experience on Reddit, shared some of the camera footage, and the response was overwhelming. People were horrified, offered advice, shared their own stalking experiences. Some commenters helped enhance the grainy footage, tried to identify the person, tried to spot any distinguishing features that might help catch them. Rachel updated her post several times, each update with new information, new developments. The police had some leads. They were investigating. They thought they might know who it was. Rachel was hopeful, thought this nightmare might finally be over. And then, like all the others, Rachel's posts disappeared. The account was deleted, and we never found out who was stalking her. We never found out if the police caught them. We never found out if Rachel was safe. She just vanished from the internet, and I think about her often. Wonder if she's okay. Wonder if she ever feels safe sleeping again. Wonder if that person was ever caught, or if they're still out there, still finding new victims, still entering people's homes while they sleep. These stories, all 7 of them that we've covered tonight, they represent something bigger than just creepy internet posts. They represent real people who came to the internet desperately seeking help, who shared their most vulnerable moments, their most terrifying experiences, and then disappeared without a trace. We don't know if they're okay. We don't know if they got the help they needed. We don't know if their nightmares ended or if they're still living them. All we know is that they were here, crying out for help, and then they were gone. And that, to me, is the most disturbing thing of all. Not the locked rooms or the stalkers or the home invasions or the smart device hacking. It's the not knowing. It's the questions that will never be answered. It's lying awake at night, wondering what happened to these people, if they're safe, if they're alive, if someone helped them, or if their worst fears came true and their disappearance from the internet mirrors a disappearance from life itself. So what do we do with this information? How do we process these stories? First, we stay vigilant. We pay attention to our surroundings. We trust our instincts when something feels wrong. We verify identities before letting people into our homes. We secure our smart devices. We watch for signs of stalking or harassment. We take threats seriously. We report suspicious behavior to authorities. We support each other. And we never, ever assume that something can't happen to us. Because that's the lie we tell ourselves. We read these stories and think, that's terrible, but it would never happen to me. But every single person in tonight's stories thought the same thing. They were just ordinary people, living ordinary lives, until suddenly they weren't. Until suddenly they were the protagonist in a nightmare they never saw coming. And if it can happen to them, it can happen to anyone. It can happen to you. Before I wrap up tonight's video, I want to thank you for watching. I know this was heavy. I know these stories are disturbing. But awareness is power. Understanding what's possible, understanding the dangers that exist in our modern world, that's the first step to protecting ourselves and the people we love. If you made it this far, if you watched all the way to the end, you're part of something important. You're part of a community that refuses to look away, that refuses to pretend these things don't happen, that stands together in the face of darkness and says, "We see you, we hear you, you're not alone." So here's what I need you to do. Subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. Hit that like button, and most importantly, comment below. Tell me what you think happened to these people. Share your own experiences. Share your own theories. Let's build a community where people can come for help and actually get it. Where stories don't just disappear into the void. Where questions get answered and nightmares get resolved. And if you're going through something similar to any of the stories tonight, please know that you don't have to face it alone. Reach out to authorities. Reach out to family and friends. Reach out to support groups. Don't suffer in silence. Don't become another unexplainable disappearance. Don't let your story end with unanswered questions. Thank you for joining me on this dark journey through the deleted posts and abandoned accounts of Reddit. Thank you for facing these uncomfortable truths with me. And thank you for being part of a community that cares, that pays attention, that refuses to look away when people need help. Until next time, stay safe, stay vigilant, and remember that the scariest stories aren't the ones about ghosts or monsters. The scariest stories are the true ones, the ones about real people facing real horrors, the ones that start with a simple post asking for help and end with silence, the ones that remind us that sometimes the most terrifying thing in the world is not knowing what happened next. Subscribe, like, comment, and I'll see you in the next video.